Darts returns to Madison Square Gardens this week for the U.S. Darts Masters. We spoke about the North American qualifiers last week, but who of the PDC representatives do you tip for the title? And just for our listeners, those are, of course, the top 6 in the world, as well as Dimitri Van den Bergh and Nathan Aspinall. And I guess since we're talking about PDC representatives, I think Jeff Smith, Matt Campbell, and Jules Van Dongen have to get into the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just thinking, actually, Co did win an unofficial Euro Tour before it started, that German Darts Championship. So I don't know if we want to call that a Euro Tour event, but maybe unofficially.
That was a premier title.
Premier title, okay. Well, that's even better then. I'm even happier. But back to the question. And yeah, I mean, at the time of recording, we don't know the draw yet, but you look down that list of players, and I think there's a good mix in there. You've got a lot of the players that we've already spoken about on the show that have won titles on stages in the last week. Michael Van Gerwen in the Premier League, Rob Cross on the Euro Tour. They're going to be going to New York full of confidence after those wins. And then you've got players that have lost in those finals, Gerwyn Price and Luke Humphries. They're going to be coming into it this week, perhaps a little bit wounded from those defeats. Price, what we spoke about, how he just missed out on winning another major title. And then Luke, the disappointment of missing out on the England World Cup team with that defeat on the Euro Tour. But two players that are going to be wanting to bounce back, and nothing's going to do that more than by winning the title this week. And it is probably one of the biggest World Series events there is. It does get a lot of attention from the PDC and from the media around here. So anyone that goes on to win that title, they will feel like it's quite an important event. And you mentioned a few of the other players there you throw into the mix. You got the defending champion Michael Smith, the world number 2 Peter Wright, who's probably got a point to prove again after a disappointing Premier League, and then Dimitri Van den Bergh and Nathan Aspinall. And the 8 players, the North American qualifiers, we spoke about them on the show last week, some of those that could potentially pose a threat this week. So it is tough to predict, but I'm going to go with Luke Humphries for this one. I think we're going to see a reaction from him this week. And even though he hasn't won a title yet this year, which is quite surprising considering how well he's played throughout the year, I think he deserves a title from what he's produced so far in 2023. And I think that elusive first title of the season, he'd have loved it to have been last weekend, but I think it's going to come this week at Madison Square Garden. And he's already played in the World Series this year. He's played in those 2 events at the start of the year back in January. So he's done the whole World Series debut thing. This is a new venue for him, but the format playing in the World Series, that's not going to be a new concept for him anymore now. And he's not in the World Cup, which is an event which he was desperate to get into, but I think he is going to put that disappointment behind him in the best way possible, and I think he is going to win the title. I'm not sure who he beats in the final, because if I pick someone and they end up being drawn in the same half, then that's my prediction already off the mark. So I'll stick with just the winner. I'm going to back Cool Hand to add his name to that World Series Roll of Honour this week.
I was thinking we might get through a week without having to make picks. No, I really want to actually fancy one of the North American players to go and win the title, but I think that's just because I want that. I mean, I like the Luke Humphries argument. It's amazing he hasn't won. He's been to 4 Euro Tour finals this year. He made 4 last year. He won all 4. He's made 4 so far this year. He's lost all 4. But he's been probably the best player on the weekend in at least 2 of those 4, if not all 4. He's been right there or thereabouts. He just hasn't got it done. I'm going to go Gezi. I think Gezi's just... he's playing too well, and he has too much confidence to let the Premier League do anything other than motivate him to come and lift the title in New York. It's the biggest city on the world stage. It's the biggest event in that city. And I think Gerwyn Price wants to prove he's the biggest player playing in the biggest event of the biggest city. And therefore, I'm going to go Gerwyn Price to be the winner. But I mean, you can make a case for almost all of these players. I mean, Dimitri Van den Bergh won a night recently in the Premier League, but beyond that has really been struggling this year. But the other 7 have all done something recently. I mean, Nathan Aspinall's been inconsistent, but he's played some really good stuff at times. We talked about Luke Humphries. We've talked about Rob Cross. We talked about Gurin Price. We've talked about Michael Van Guren all on this episode and how good they're playing. Peter Wright won a Euro Tour recently, and Michael Smith is the world #1 world champ and won 3 consecutive Premier League nights. I think you can make a case for almost all of them except maybe Dimitri Vandenberg. So I guess that means it's going to be Dimitri Vandenberg's title to win.